We will now call to order the February 27th, 2024 meeting of the Historic Review Board. Did you want to take roll? It says roll on here.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll take roll again.
Okay.
Board Member Green.
Present.
Board Member Edgar.
Present.
Board Member Lawrence.
Present.
Vice Chair Powell.
Present.
Chair Ferry.
Present.
I think we do have, we have nobody here for public comment, not on the record, but we do have elections tonight. So tonight is voting for chair and vice chair. So kind of send it back to the board. And at some point when there's someone wants to make a motion, Kay will work with any motions, after your discussions.
We do have two folks online, so I don't know if they wanted to give public comment for something not on the agenda or if they're here for the item.
They're here for the item.
They're both here for, okay, great. Then we don't have any public comments.
We're at nominations.
Your nomination.
I nominate Board Chair Ferry for an additional year.
I second that nomination. I second the nomination.
Board Member Green.
Aye.
Board Member Edgar.
Aye.
Board Member Lawrence.
Aye.
Vice Chair Powell.
Aye.
Chair Ferry.
Aye. Thank you, guys. And I nominate Board Member Powell for vice chair.
I'll second.
Board Member Green.
Aye.
Board Member Edgar.
Aye.
Board Member Lawrence.
Aye.
Vice Chair Powell.
Aye.
Chair Ferry.
Aye. All right.
All right, congratulations, Chair Ferry and Vice Chair Powell.
So we will move on to the agenda portion of the meeting. We have one public hearing on land use application to schedule tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Historic Review Board are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask the board members whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the board members have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any members of the audience may question any board member about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the public hearing. Oh, I apologize. I skipped meeting minutes, didn't I? Should we do that first, or just keep going? Okay, apologies. Any member of the audience may question any board member about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the board will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and email it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed on the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to the staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Historic Review Board makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or the Land Use Board of Appeals, or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. I apologize, I skipped the meeting minutes for approval. Would you like to do those?
We can wait till after.
We can do that after.
Okay. All right, so we have GLUA 2402 and HR 2401. It's new construction, and HR 2402 demolition it's 151 Molalla. The new construction of a duplex on land that is part of a designated landmark, the Rasmussen-Buol House, and the demolition of a one-car garage and reduction of the size of a landmark. I will now ask each board member if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare, if they have made a site visit, and if they have noted any material information, they should let us know what they've received. Board Member Green?
I visited the site, no conflict of interest and no ex parte contact.
Board Member Powell?
I also have visited the site. I have no ex parte contact or no conflict of interest.
Board Member Edgar?
I have also visited the site. I have no conflict of interest or ex parte contact.
And Board Member Lawrence?
I have also visited the site, and I have no conflict of interest or contact.
I have visited the site, and I have no ex parte contact or conflict of interest. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the board members about these disclosures? All right, we will now commence with the staff planning report.
All right, thank you, Chair Ferry. We'll get this up. All right. So as indicated by Chair Ferry, there's kind of three parts to this application. It's approval of a proposed new construction, demolition of the existing one-car garage, and the reduction of the size of the landmark of the historic resource. So all those pieces are part of the motion you would make tonight. You don't have to make separate motions. The reason we have two file numbers is really just a mechanics of how we take fees in. We have a demolition fee related, and they can't take in both fees. So it's just a mechanics of how we take in our projects. Okay, so this is a project that some of you have seen before. The applicant came in last spring with a proposed triplex. The board ended up voting to deny the application. The applicant has really took the board's comments and staff's recommendations to heart and came back with a revised design for a duplex. So I'll go through the elevations and site plan, but I have this slide are really kind of the four, I think, major findings that staff has in the recommendation of approval for this and why it's different from a year ago. So this is the second proposal. The applicant really did review the design direction given by the board. They've reduced one unit, they've increased the setbacks, they created the front portion of the building, which is a 1.5 story. They've increased the windows. They've done a lot of design modifications. The property is zoned mixed-use corridor, which actually allows us permitted uses, commercial, office, multifamily, and actually a duplex is the lowest density use allowed in the zone. A single-family house would actually not be a permitted use. So at this point, this is the lowest density proposal that the zone allows. Staff reviewed the proposal and found that the applicant had substantially reduced the adverse impact on the Rasmussen-Buol House. Once again, I explained the increased setback, the addition of the 1.5-story front element, and the reduction of the massing really produced a design I think the board could approve. Understanding the landmark size and location at the property line, the landmark really is right at its own property line, which really is going to make any new construction on the lot next door a little complicated. Almost any development have some type of impact on the resource. Staff finds that this proposal is the best approach for such a confined lot and utilizes the May 2023 design direction from the Historic Review Board. Oh, shoot, let's see. Okay, just to provide an overview, this site is located at the intersection of Logos and Molalla. 151 Molalla, which is the landmark, the Rasmussen-Buol House, was on 2 lots of record. The second lot of record was re-recognized, and a lot line adjustment was completed to change the orientation from Logos to Molalla Avenue, which can be done outside of the Historic Review Board process. This is a photo of the historic landmark prior to it being painted white, but it's a good photo showing the resource. And next slide shows up where you see the blue arrow is the location of the 1-car garage. And there's also a street view showing the new paint scheme of the historic resources. As you know, the board does not, our historic preservation program does not review paint colors as part of this process. Though the board could put an initial request for a paint color at the time of a new construction infill, but once they move forward, that would be up to the individual property owners. One comment that was made by a neighboring public related to parking, and I do want to state that the applicant is meeting their parking requirements in this area along Molalla Avenue and 7th Street. They're within a half mile of a frequent bus service, which per state law now, as of last year, there is no minimum required parking. So there is no nexus for the board to look at parking as part of your analysis. You could look, if they wanted to build a garage, you could look what it looks like, but you can't, as part of your analysis, require them to put parking spaces. So here's a photo, just in case there's a question, of what was denied last year. So here's a slide of showing the triplex. It was much closer up. One of the big findings that the board had the last round was that with the triplex so close to the corner, it was really removing that sight line of the landmark, which was seen, for the life of the landmark as a corner lot house, as a prominent house on the corner lot. And so that additional setback by the applicant is trying to address that concern by the Historic Review Board. So this shows the Logos Street elevation of the duplex. Here we have the Molalla Avenue elevation, both kind of 2 different 3D renderings looking at its relationship to the historic landmark. As you notice, while some of the area does have a 2-story volume, I think having this front 1.5-story volume goes a long way to be showing the same compatibility with the landmark that's also 1.5-story. This shows the site plan of the duplex. Unfortunately, the applicant didn't have the landmark's location, and I can, when we get to the applicant's presentation, they can identify, but it is 26 feet, the setback from the property line to the porch of the duplex. So I can't quite see it from that, but it's 26 feet. Here are the elevations. And I've provided slides for all the conditions of approval. I don't have to go through all of them, but a couple ones I wanted to identify. One, and I'm going to do the next one. There's been some discussion of kind of post-approval design tweaks, as you move forward through construction. So I added condition approval number 6, which is something the board may want to look at in the future. And that is actually the Historic Review Board policy for porches for historic resources. And so I have the condition that basically says if you, through the building permit process need to make slight changes to your porch design, you need to be in compliance with the HRB policy that historic homes are. So it's kind of showing that lower bar. So it allows, if there are kind of small tweaks, the inevitable always happens after you get approved and you're going through the building permit process. So this may be one approach in the future, would be saying, if there's small changes, you can do it because here's the bar of what we would make an historic resource do. Most of the other conditions just reiterate French doors, 1/1 windows. You can all have fiberglass, aluminum clad wood or wood. Identify Marvin integrity or equivalent. There's a lot of different fiberglass window styles, and actually it's one of our future certified local government, or one of our future HRB work plans is to kind of work on that. So right now we have to name a product we think meets the standard, which is so far has been Marvin integrity. It's not saying that the applicant must use Marvin integrity, but it's equivalent because we have to place a clear and objective standard. The last one is the reduction of the landmark, and it's really tied to the certificate of occupancy of this proposal. So if for some reason the applicant doesn't move forward with construction, the landmark would not be reduced. So a future project would have to come back and do the same process. But once there's a certificate of occupancy received for this project, the landmark for the Rasmussen-Buol House would go back to just the tax lot that the landmark is on. So those are kind of the main conditions. Put some additional conditions related to landscaping. Ideally, initial landscaping should be either native to our area or be appropriate for a 19th century, early 20th century garden. So you kind of get one or the other. And then if possible, to retain any landscaping or trees in that front 26 feet if possible. So your options this evening are approve the proposal with conditions. Right now we have staff recommendation. You can you approve the proposal with modifying those conditions and provide any revised findings. Deny the proposal and provide revised findings and continue the hearing and request more information. So I'm available for any questions the board has. I know the applicant's representative is here this evening. So I might go back to a slide. There we go.
Christina, one of the questions I have is on parking. After reading the one letter, comment that was sent in, the number of vehicles for a duplex like this of this size should be we should estimate four vehicles. And I don't know if any of this applies to 1740.
It doesn't. So this is the thing, you're reviewing the proposal, like what they are proposing, the aesthetics, the design review of the structure. What the board doesn't have the authority to do is Carrie, the slide that she kind of went really quickly over at the end, is nexus. What is the part of the code that talks about parking requirements? That's not in 1740. That's the purview of our 1752 parking standards. And for duplexes, we have parking standards, but then we have the state a ruling called the CFEC, excuse me, apologies. It is, can you say it really quickly?
So the climate-friendly equitable communities is a executive order that Governor Brown signed at a couple of years ago, maybe the beginning of last year. I can't remember exactly when. And there's a clause or an administrative rule is the word I'm looking for, an Oregon administrative rule that went into effect last January of 2023 that states that we, cities, local jurisdictions can't require minimum parking in certain circumstances. And one of those circumstances is within half mile of a frequent transit corridor. And so TriMet's line 33 that goes through the entire city, basically from 99 all the way up to Clackamas Community College, is a frequent transit line. And so we're not able to require any parking within half a mile of that line. That doesn't mean that a developer could choose to build parking, but the city's precluded from requiring it.
So in this case, 33 goes up Lynn Avenue, which is not Molalla Avenue, but it goes up and, yeah, I guess it's in half a mile, but it's over kind of like up a hill and down a hill and stuff in that area. So it's logistically difficult, if not impossible, for somebody to walk that regularly as a commuting person.
Right, and the Oregon administrative rule basically says that it can be measured as the crow flies. So we have a GIS layer that just measured half a mile from the line.
Gotcha.
I completely understand in what you're getting at with the topography between Lynn and Molalla.
I had a question as well. It says on page 17 of the staff report, it says, therefore, staff recommends that the applicant include corner trim on the home. I noticed that that wasn't in the conditions of approval. Would that be something that we would discuss and then add on to the conditions?
Well, the applicant has proposed corner trim already.
Oh, okay,
so,
it's already on there.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell from these renderings because they just look like straight lines.
I think the one condition related to a public comment that it was just probably more of a rendering question, if the eaves really did extend. And so it looked like they did, but I just put a just in case condition in there.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. Are there any more questions for staff?
One last question would be on windows and going back to the problem we had with the cottage homes where they put in the windows and they were not recessed or trimmed out in a manner that the board considered to be adequate. Have we got that addressed well within what we're...
The board could, after the applicant has talked, and I'll bring up the condition, hold on. If the board feels they want to add an extra sentence or two to address that, I'm going to grab the condition I think might be appropriate. I think maybe find... Probably number 5. So let me go to find number 5. Oh, let's go down this way. So that if the board wants to think about, they don't have to do it right now, but if they want to think about an additional sentence that you think may further kind of provide direction of the minimum sill depth or to ensure that there is a window to wall differentiation of plane. That can definitely be an additional. And this falls into exactly with a Historic Review Board's work plan of really kind of tying in what a standard condition of approval would be for windows.
Okay.
So if there are no more questions for staff, we will move on to public testimony. Is there any public testimony? Just as a reminder, the applicant speaks first, and they have up to 15 minutes to describe their application.
Can you hear me all right? Perfect. And then I had sent in some slides. I think I will go through them.
You want to bring it just a little bit? Sometimes you really have to just get in there.
Hi. All right, my name is Kimberly Freeman. I'm representing the applicant this evening, and it's wonderful to be able to speak with you this afternoon or this evening. And it's wonderful to be in person as well after such a long time being away. I have a couple of slides I'd love to run through with you. Oh, thank you. Before I start, we've reviewed the staff report and the conditions of approval, and we are in agreement and supportive of the staff recommendation and the conditions of approval as they're written. And if there are some additional details that would be helpful to work through with window details, we're definitely open to working with you to make sure that the home is representing the integrity and respecting the landmark that is adjacent. So let's run through these real quick. Let's see. There we go. This first slide is just rehashing a lot of what staff has already reviewed with you, the specific, the 3 parts of the request, the construction of the duplex, modification of the landmark boundaries, and also the demolition of the small garage. And the other item that I wanted to stress, and what most of these slides will go through, is that this design was specifically developed in response to the information and the input and the feedback that we received in the last presentation and the last application that we had on this site. So we heard, and a lot of modifications and a lot of care has been made in redesigning the project to be more reflective and respectful of the neighboring landmark property. There's kind of 3 or 4 key areas that I'd like to summarize. Staff has already done a beautiful job describing them, but I'd like to repeat them just because I think it's always good to kind of look at things from different perspectives. So one of the big things that was changed with this proposal is the front setback to this structure is now 26. It's proposed to be 26 feet 2 inches. And that's roughly about the same setback as the landmark. I did see one setback noted on a historic map that showed it at the landmark at about 24 feet, but I did not physically go onto that property and measure that. But that was some information that I had gathered in one of the reports that I had read. So that front setback with the proposed duplex is really looking to respect that front lot line of the existing landmark structure and trying to make sure that we're kind of maintaining that common streetscape element where, you know, kind of those traditional and consistent rhythms kind of as you go down and built form as you go down the street is always a good thing, I think. The second key item that's different with this proposal is that the side setback for this proposed development has been increased to 9.5 feet, which gets us to about 14 feet between the structures, which is greater than the prior application had shown. So what we're trying to do is give as much distance between the 2 structures as possible. Additionally, the third item that I wanted to stress is that we've looked to reduce that front mass of this structure. We've brought that down to 1.5 stories, which is consistent with the Rasmussen-Buol House next door. And that reduction to 1.5 stories is about 10 feet deep. And I have a slide where we can look at that from the side, and I've labeled that depth as well. And The other item is that we've really tried to utilize the topography on the site. This site is sloping down towards Logos, and we've really tried to tuck that duplex in to the site so that it is an additional way to kind of reduce the mass and reduce the bulk and the impact on the landmark structure. So all of these choices were very purposeful and driven by the input and the feedback that we had gotten about this time last year. So, and some of these slides are just going to repeat some of the items, but I wanted to make sure that you guys had the data. So the front setback has been increased, the side setback has been increased. And this slide, it also shows where the parking is located tucked behind the structure. And there's really no room for any additional parking on site. So about as much parking as we could provide has been provided or proposed on the site. This is the Logos Street view. As you can see, I've labeled that there's a 10-foot setback from that two-story mass. And what that does is it helps to show consistency with the 1.5-story landmark next door, while also allowing for that two-story volume to be located on the site, but further back, respecting that perspective from the corner. This is the Molalla Street view. You can see that there are additional windows. You can see kind of where that stepped massing is from the street. And this perspective, I always think that this is a good perspective on what this will potentially look like from the corner or the intersection of Molalla and Logos. And what we can see is that we've done everything we can to kind of tuck this duplex into the existing topography. And we can see that the height and the bulk we've reduced it to as much, to the level that we can. And I think it's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty good. And that is what I have for you this evening as far as slides and presentation goes. Obviously, I'm here to answer any questions that you have, and we are very supportive of staff's recommendation and the conditions of approval. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public testimony tonight, or just the presentation? Okay. Do any board members have any questions for the applicant?
I do. Thanks for coming, Kimberly. Appreciate you presenting that. I do have a question on the drawings. We noticed, I noticed the bracket corbel that is sticking out a bit beyond that. And I was wondering, looking at it, I was thinking if the roof actually went out to the edge of that corbel, it would be more historically accurate to the Buol House, the Buol House. And I wondered if there'd been any consideration to that, extending the roof, the eave out to match that.
We can definitely look into that. What depth of eave were you thinking?
Well, I mean, if you look at it, it looks to me like it's probably 12 inches, 14 inches, and I'm thinking, something more to match the Buol House. That picture you just showed us of the corner, if you were just to compare that and extend that out to the roof line, it would, I don't want to match the house exactly, but it would be more historically accurate.
Maybe like an 18-inch eave?
Hard to say I don't know the exact what that would be, but it looks like it's 18 to.
Okay.
What would you say? You got a better eye than I do. 18
Actually,
inches.
I had the same thought, and it kind of stemmed from the comment of, it might have been a neighbor or something that thought that there was a rafter sticking beyond the gutters, and I didn't see anything along that line, but I think perhaps what they were referring to was the knee braces extending past the gable overhang. It looks like 12-inch overhangs on the eaves and the gables, and so that would make knee braces that are proportional to a 12-inch overhang quite small, unusually small, or protruding quite a bit past. So my thoughts were exactly Board Member Powell's. It seemed like larger overhangs would be appropriate. I looked at the existing house, and I would say that the eave overhangs are probably at least 24, the gable overhangs are at least 24, and the eave overhangs are probably close to 36. And I wouldn't be supportive of that large of overhangs, but I had the same feeling that larger overhangs would potentially be appropriate. Does that pose any problem?
I don't think it does. I don't think it does. I think that there is a small rendering glitch on the drawings where those brackets are looking to extend beyond, and obviously that's not the intention. But I believe we can definitely look at extending those eaves to be more proportional. And, I don't know if that would be a good condition of approval that we can, but.
I have two recommendations.
Okay.
I would recommend it.
Okay.
Or but not.
I'm sorry, you said 18?
I concur.
Okay.
I would love to see look and feel really how they're set in and their height, because in a sense, you see a very nice building with, you can see the size and the width. So there seem to be the windows a little taller, a little bit narrower in design. But if they can have the relief on them that is comparable, or so that they don't detract from the other building. It's just trying to make sure that we have a design compatibility of something that's as important as windows, and they reflect a lot of character of the construction.
They absolutely do. With the recommended window style, does that have the typical relief that would be consistent, or?
So this is our continued goal to have more precise pictures. I do have a recommendation.
Christina, is your mic on? Okay,
I'm
thanks.
sorry. I do have a recommendation. Condition of approval number 5, which talks about that they can be aluminum clad, wood, Marvin integrity equivalent. Add a second sentence. It says the applicant shall ensure that the window design incorporates a change in the plane, with a sill depth of at least 1 inch, 2 inch, and provides trim on all the windows. So to me, it could be that the sill depth, that I don't know the proposed sill depth on the plans, but it could be worth it to cite a specific number.
And I can check with our designer. They're not here this evening, but we can definitely refine that for you and get you either that information or kind of work towards getting you a cross-section of those windows as well.
Do we have any further drawings that we can look at that?
No, so at this level, you're not going to get building permit information,
Sure.
right? Because it's preliminary. So some of the reasons that we're looking into a more specific, clear and objective conditions is, you get the initial historic review board approval, and then you get refining into your building permits, and then there's always kind of the implementation question. But with the kind of clear and objective conditions, and if the board can come up with a condition this evening that kind of, I think, addresses the concern, which I don't think the applicant's doing, but it's always the concern of we're going to get a flat plane window, right? We're going to get a flat plane building with the windows and the trim and no sill depth. And they may have fiberglass windows to check the box, but it's not giving that the window wall change in plane. And if the board can come up with a clear and objective condition of approval this evening, could move forward with a decision. If you feel like you really just need that information, or the applicant needs that information, then we would continue it to the next meeting. But if you can come up with, you think would be at a minimum, at a staff level, I always recommend in general, if you can get to an agreement at a meeting, go for it. If you can't, then continue.
Just two things come to mind. One, as far as the trim, we know that we potentially will be addressing windows in more detail on how they trim out. With what's currently available in the marketplace, I would be cautious about constraining an applicant with trim that's going to be hard to achieve as far as where the glazing placement is relative to the trim, until we work out what can really be accomplished with the products that are on the market. And then the other thing would be in response to size, that Board Member Edgar mentioned, egress is the constraint that they're going to bump up against for the window size there. They can't go narrower and meet egress. So they could only, to change proportion, they could only go taller, which would be out of the norm, what we would see now. Not out of the norm necessarily in 1910, but out of the norm with what we would see now. And the 3050 window, 3 foot wide, 5 foot high, will meet egress, and they have to meet that for the bedroom windows at least.
There's also an issue, with code on that we have a distance on second floor. So if we raise the height of those windows,
right,
you have a minimum distance from the floor to the sill, and then you have to invoke child safety latches and other things. That all of that is going to play into the size of that window.
Right.
Well, I think the windows they look fine to me. My concern is I just don't want a flat window against the wall. So if we can come up with a 1 inch, 2 inch depth of plane, we could solve it. Pretty easily. And I'm, you're the more construction oriented. I would, whatever that seems. On the older homes, it's much deeper, but it doesn't have to necessarily be, because we're not trying to match.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
it's a little problematic at this point, and without burdening, this particular application, the typical nail fin window, which would typically be what goes in, your glazing is going to be, an inch to an inch and a half in front of the wall sheathing. So to try to get trim that's another inch or so proud of it, it's unworkably thick in relative to the siding. So that's kind of a problem at this point, until we, you might say, move into window design that would either mandate windows, which Denver did, I think, mandate that they be partially inset into the framing to accomplish that. But that's a tall order to apply, you might say, initially on a particular applicant, until that became kind of a policy.
Do we have any more questions for the applicant, and then we can move into deliberations?
What's that?
I said if we don't have any more questions for the applicant, we can then move into board deliberations and discuss window depth. We're good? Okay, thank you so much. All right, so we will now move into board deliberations, and I think we already started talking a little bit about windows, and I would agree that having some sort of depth of plane would be great, and you were suggesting that possibly what would be an appropriate depth that you were thinking?
What I think we would see typically in the marketplace today, assuming that they're using a nail fin install window, which would be my guess, and that maybe the designer would have to clarify that for sure. But I would see, in my thought, like a minimum 3.5 inch trim around the windows with like a half sill under it to replicate the typical design of the time, but not insist that that trim be, might pass the glazing, because the glazing may, those will likely be single hung windows, so the glazing on the lower sash will be inset from the other, and I think that's important rather than just a flat. I think that's what you're referencing, like just a flat glazing with a mole bar, and I don't see any that appear to be of that type there. That would maybe be a casement window, and I don't see them taking that approach. So I would say that a reasonable requirement might be minimum 3.5-inch trim on the sides and top, and a half sill on the bottom to replicate that as far as windows. And then as far as the corner trim, it seems like corner trim would be appropriate, and this is basically a concept plan as I see it, so it's, in other words, just isn't reflecting that level of detail at that point, but I think that would be, in my mind, a reasonable ask, would be like a 5.5-inch corner trim.
And is this a three-quarter depth?
5/4.
Yeah, right. It probably would be thicker than that, so it's actually proud of the siding, but yeah.
Isn't that already required, the corner trim?
Yeah, I mean, they're already proposing the corner
Okay.
trim. So kind of what I'm hearing is, this is the window, so the applicant shall ensure that the window design incorporates a change in plane and inset of at least 1 inch? Is that what you're saying, Dave, maybe? You said about a 1 inch change in plane between the glazing and the wall? Or is that, did I not get that correct?
You say 1 or 1.5 inch?
Well, the most of the nail fin windows, the upper glazing is going to be probably an inch proud of the subsheeting. So,
Okay.
On my own house in particular, I used 1x6 side trim, but actually the glazing is probably a little bit in front of the trim.
Okay.
And it's hard to achieve unless you go a true wood window that has the sash set back into the frame. It's going to be hard to achieve that if they want to use like a nail fin window.
So
The Marvin
using-
product, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
The Marvin product they were referencing, I don't know if we have anything that says that's what it needs to be, but that product in itself is a 1/2 inch in front of the nail fins on the front instead of that 1.5 inch setback. But that's a very limiting idea, great expense, and that's a very unique product, and I don't see that there's many windows I've ever come across that are any different from that. So it's a little curious to try to come up with that setback with a 5/4 trim around it. We're right there in plane.
Right.
I think what I heard, and I'm a little out over my skis in this, but so what I wrote down, and then you'll tell me what part I got wrong, is you said something about 3.5-inch trim on the sides and the top with a half sill on the bottom. And then you said something about 5.5-inch corner trim with a 3/4 inch depth.
Right. It would essentially be 1x6 corner trim on the outside building corners. Yeah.
Okay. So did that kind of capture what everybody heard, or do you want to modify what I said?
That's what I heard.
Yeah, I think that's what we heard.
Okay.
All right, I've been writing these down because, so can you, I lost half. Can you say that one more time? I have the.
Sure.
Applicant sure the window design incorporates a change in plane with 3.5 inch trim on
Sides and top with a half sill on the bottom.
Okay. And then I think in the condition related to corner trim, we can add to a different, I don't want to
Yeah,
We'll
1 by
separate
6
that
corner
out.
trim.
So we have revised condition approval 5, that the applicant shall ensure that the window design incorporates a change in plane with 3.5-inch trim on the sides and top with a half sill on the bottom. Okay. We also have a revised condition approval 3. The applicant shall revise the overhang to be at least 18 inches. And then for the corner trim, let's see if there's one we can amend rather than add. Okay, under 2, just to make it easier, 2, we have the applicant shall utilize smooth fiber cement or wood siding. No pressure treated wood shall be visible. Corner trim shall be at least, what was the dimension?
Was,
6 inch by 1 by 6.
1 by 6 corner trim on exterior corners.
Okay, so that is the revised condition of approval 2. Corner trim shall be at least 1 by 6 corner trim, and that's amending a second sentence to condition approval number 2. So the 3 revised conditions are corner trim, number 2, 18-inch overhang, number 3, and number 5, the window specs. So those are the 3 as described. And if that's something the board wants, I'll add that to the final notice of decision. Is there any additional conditions the board wants to?
On the overhangs, if I'm hearing everything correctly, is like an 18-inch gable overhang? Is that, and like a 24-inch? Generally speaking, the eave overhang will be proportionally somewhat larger than the overhang. Eave overhang, would it be reasonable to ask 24-inch eave overhangs and 18-inch, minimum 18-inch gable overhang? Or what's the thought on that?
Is there a concern with setback?
Yeah, I'm not seeing a setback. Obviously, if there's a setback problem, that would supersede our direction. In other words, that gets into setbacks. Doesn't appear that it would.
I'm not really stuck on, I kind of just want to get that overhang larger. I'm not really stuck on trying to match the other house, which is what this would do, kind of.
No, it would be smaller still.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well-
I think the existing house is probably at least 24 and 36 on the eave
Probably.
overhangs. Yeah, I agree. I don't think we need to try to match or want to try to match the other house. It just seems that proportionally, we've seen a shift to smaller overhangs in buildings, but they don't quite, in my mind, make the historic look.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
No, I'm trying to make it, I'm trying to have it present itself as more traditional and less modern. And
Yes.
by 18 inches, that in fact does it. If we go 24 and 18 on top, 24 on bottom, we're back into real traditional, you know.
Yeah. I wouldn't be hung up on the eave overhang. It's just that typically eave overhangs are a little bit more than gable overhangs. That's the only thing that I would see as a description. I don't know that we necessarily need to combine them to that, but if the gable overhangs are less than 18 inches, then I think you start getting a problem with proportion with the knee braces.
In the knee braces, I really think that the size or the compatibility to the existing knee braces that are in the historic building, if we can stay close to that, it makes it less detracting.
Yeah, you'll see some variation in knee braces because you see some styles with fairly large knee braces and maybe even scroll cut or whatever, and that's not what we're necessarily looking as I see it. I mean, go ahead.
I think that's something to bring up, though, that's going to be important, because with faux knee braces, what we're going to see is 4x4 material, L bracket, downturn, and that's not going to be indicative of an actual product. So you'd have to have at least a 6'4", crossbar, and then 4 underneath would be fine, but it does have to read to be an actual product, and especially if we're doing fiber cement siding, where you could potentially have the knee brace just attached to the sheathing, and then a channel around it, and then fiber cement, and it's just very obvious.
Yeah. And in my view, I mean, a 4-inch is an appropriate proportion for knee brace in that case. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, I keep turning it off. Apologies. Do you feel that you want to add additional direction on the knee braces, or do you feel that the applicant's submittal adequately addresses knee brace dimensions?
I personally think the drawing, what I've seen, looks like what we're asking for. It looks to me like a 4-inch from the drawing. I don't have the specifics on it, obviously, but that's what it looks like. So I think that's their intention.
Yeah, I would agree, yeah.
So I don't think we need to specify. I don't think.
Okay, so right now we still have the 3 revised conditions. Corner trim, 1x6 corner trim, 18-inch overhang, and the additional directions on the windows.
I actually
So
really,
conditions 2, 3, and 5.
I liked the specification of the gable overhang being 18 inches, whereas the extended eave overhang being slightly larger, just for proportional,
Okay.
if we wouldn't mind.
So we're saying that
Everybody's in agreement.
So, real quickly, which 18 inches is for the main overhang or the eave overhang?
For the gable, so at the gable, the point that goes up, it would have 18 inches over, where the eave would be at the end, the extended.
So the eave shall be at least 2 inches more? I mean, what specifically do you want to see?
So-
Did you want 18 inches and 2 feet?
So if we specified a minimum of 18-inch gable overhang and a minimum of, let's say, 22-inch eave overhang, is that reasonable? Yes.
I think that sounds reasonable.
Okay, so we have a minimum 18-inch gable overhang and a minimum 22-inch eave overhang. And while the record, the public comment period is closed, the applicant can nod or thumbs up if that's moving forward. Okay.
Well, it sounds like since we're in the nitty-gritty, do we have any larger concerns about the overall design?
One other slight concern, I guess, of mine for overall balance is the left, well, that would maybe be the rear elevation.
Looks like the locus.
But you have the upper wall with no windows at all on that one elevation towards the parking area.
What page are you on?
Okay, would you mind opening up?
I'm on page 8.
Page
Let's
8.
see if we went to the
My
actual building
presentation.
elevations, it would be the left elevation. There's no
Yeah.
windows at all.
Upstairs.
Yeah.
It's the slide that has the elevation drawings.
So those, if you look at the floor plan, that's, there's a bedroom front and back. An additional window.
All right.
And I guess I'm curious at my fellow board members' thoughts about that. I don't want to unnecessarily burden the applicant, but I was looking at the floor plan, if I can find it. But there's a bedroom front and back there, so that would add a window probably right close to the closet wall in each case. So there's a bathroom in between. It would be fairly symmetrical in that it would add two
Yeah, that one.
windows in that,
One more down.
space.
Next slide.
In that left elevation.
Yeah.
I'm bringing up, just so everyone can see the same, it's this elevation, no, one more. Is it this one you're speaking of?
No, it was the
go
previous
back-
one.
Go back one.
Previous one, okay.
There.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah,
On the right-hand side, there's the left elevation.
Yep.
You know, I actually live next to a historical home, and it has no second-story windows facing me. I didn't know it's possible there's a consideration for like site views between the two. There seems to be trees between that and the house that's backed up there, but
So there is, as far as.
There's a maple.
Tree that
Yeah.
they would be kind of looking out at that, yeah. Each of those bedrooms already have, a 3050 window, a pair of 3050 windows, so they got ample windows for sure. It would be basically just, a nod to exterior style. I'm mindful of complicating the livability or the usability of a room. I mean, we want to be cautious of that, but I don't think that would unduly complicate it, but what's the thought of the rest of you? I mean, is that
from my perspective, I don't think that it bothers me that there's no second-story windows there. It is facing, another building.
it's a very subordinate view.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
That was my initial thought.
No big deal then.
I was not gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
make that an issue. I didn't think just because I thought it does look odd, but if it were facing either street, absolutely. But the view,
Yeah.
to Chair Ferry's comment, there's a big tree there and somebody's backyard, so I guess I'm not that concerned about it.
Yep, I get it. I don't like to unnecessarily burden applicants.
Exactly.
I would just like to compliment the architect and the designers. I think that this was a very good effort to take instructions and thoughts from the previous go-round, and I think that it was done very well. Overall, I was very pleased with it.
I agree. Yeah.
My only other question is, does anybody have an issue with the hip on the roof? With the elevation change moving to the lateral part of the building?
That's what.
Exactly, yeah. It's still just something that I see and I'm looking at and going, why do we have a hip roof in one spot on all the roof lines on the building?
I did notice it. What I found, there were so many different roof angles that it didn't affect me.
Goes away.
Yeah, I mean, it really just goes away from what I saw. So that didn't bother me. It did look odd on the one we're looking at there, but if you're looking at it from any other angle,
Yeah.
it goes away. So
It's in the subordinate position where it is off to the back.
Exactly.
Again, it's one of those things that kind of disappears
yeah, I think so.
in its importance.
Agreed. So should we take possibly a moment and talk about the demolition of the garage?
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know how familiar you guys are with that part of the neighborhood, but I don't know that I'd even consider it a garage. So I don't have any problem at all with it.
Yeah, if it was a historic garage or something, where the Pony Express used to stop, I'd say, yeah, we got a problem maybe, but I don't think so. I think it's really, it's certainly not going to help the property.
I agree, but I just would love to have enough parking spots there so that people aren't parking in the street and getting everybody mad. It's being a good neighbor.
Yeah, the demolition of the garage is the only thing that guarantees the 2 spots that we're going to get out of the property.
Yeah, critical spots.
Yeah.
All right. And then the last thing is the removal of the landmark status. Now, this is something that I personally had a little bump against because one of the things is preserving that view corridor as you come up from 7th Street and turn onto Molalla, which, you see the house, which, the landmark house. And as soon as we remove that landmark designation, there could be an addition, there could be a garage built there, there could be any number of things. It's now open space that's about, 26 by 50 feet, right? So do we have any concerns? I understand, not wanting to make the owner of a new construction house come before us every time they want to do some sort of change to their property. But there is the concern that possibly something could be put there that would greatly affect the resource.
One option, if the board wants to do that, is could be retaining the landmark, but basically saying that the, future alterations or, additions to the building that do not encroach into the front yard setback or the front yard as proposed. It's basically only when the applicant proposes something in that front area would it have to go back to the board. So it basically says everyday changes, 7 years from now, they want to, redo the front porch. 10 years from now, we're not trying to find, trying to send folks in, which is, the goal, right? Once you get through the process, but it could be that you retain the landmark status, but for, reviewing anything in that area. Could be something the board wants to do.
I like that idea, but
I don't know, I hadn't thought of that one.
I misunderstood it. I didn't think of it along those lines. I was thinking it as we were changing that particular property, right? Taking it, make that not the landmark, and I think that's where I was confused. So I like Christine's idea.
Christine, I like that idea. There is some degree of needs that maybe are not part of HRB, but financing and separate. As you have one historic building and you have this other complex, it's how it could be potentially marketed sometime out in the future. And so is where the existing owners this is an investment to whoever comes in, and they may not understand all of the implications of what we're trying to protect with the existing house. And so it's with this separation, the big concern to me is just it leads to a situation where a new owner could come along and not have any understandings, no connection. And what we're perceiving is there is a need to protect the integrity of the existing house.
Seems like there's also a zoning issue, because if we're at the lowest level of that zoning right now where a duplex goes in, but now it's no longer designated, who's to say 7 years from now it's not an addition that we're talking about, it's removing the house and putting a different usage building there, which there'd just be nothing to do about that at that point.
so are we thinking that we want to keep the landmark status on the entire property or possibly just move it to the front portion?
I don't know if I have an opinion on that.
One option could be, this is actually what the board did for the property on Cleveland last year, that little tiny house and the very large property. The landmark status was based on a map. And so it was, we could write a condition that verbally says it. In a sense, it would be the landmark tax lot and the area in front to the proposed new construction. So in a sense, it would be an L. The landmark would be an L. So that is one nice way of saying it, in the sense that if you kept the landmark, then we'd have to explain a condition, all the times when the board wouldn't be reviewed, and then there's always going to be a weird one in the middle. We're not too sure. But if the landmark just became the L,
You could protect that front area.
You could protect that front. And then really, changes and, alterations 15, 20 years from now on the main structure, you don't have to call the preservation planner up to say, I want to put a new window in, or I want to, change my porch.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I like that idea.
And that would restrain any new development if they did happen to tear this down?
Yeah, that would, in a
Yeah.
sense, if you did the L, and I'll work on what it says, but imagine in your mind an L overlay. Any proposal that's inside the L overlay gets triggered for a historic review board.
Okay.
So I guess technically, 20 years from now, someone could demolish, I don't know, it takes a long time to demolish a resource. It's just, a building that's just built, but, I guess they could replace it, but not in that first bit.
Okay.
So, that's some way of looking at a compromise without really constraining a new construction. That's, once again, this is a landmark, it's not a district. The idea is, how does it affect that resource?
I like that idea.
Okay.
I think I'm good. I
Yeah.
just wanted to say, I like that. It's a simple design. It fits much better. I like the roof lines for the most part. The porch, I like the transition to the historic property. I think it makes a much better view going up the hill and or down the hill. So overall, I think it's a terrific approach to that space.
Yes,
Agreed.
agreed.
Yeah, and I concur. I think they really took to heart the counsel from the previous session.
Which is very nice when somebody listens.
Thank you. So are we ready for a motion?
Yeah, should we make a
Just real
motion?
quickly, I'm just writing,
Oh, okay,
I'm
okay.
ad hoc writing that additional condition.
Yeah.
Almost there.
We said a lot.
Okay. The proposed landmark boundary will be reduced to exclude the proposed new construction, but will retain the front yard setback of 26 feet as part of the landmark boundary. This will ensure that any revisions to the development in the future will be reviewed by the Historic Review Board if it encroaches in the front setback area. Okay.
Sounds great.
Sounds good. Now, after our talk with Attorney Richter, should we invite the applicant back up to discuss these
Yeah.
things?
And that will be, just so you know, that will be a revised, added condition of approval number 13.
13, okay. Hi, thank you for coming back up.
Hello.
After listening to board deliberations, do you see any objections to any of the concerns the board has raised?
Everything sounds reasonable at this point. The only question I have is I'll have to take a look at the eaves projecting into the setback along Locust, because I believe that is a 5-foot setback, and I don't know the code's allowed encroachment on that side.
The mixed-use corridor doesn't have a 5-foot setback,
So it's good. Okay.
you are fine. Now, the key is if there is a public utility easement or some kind of public works easement or requirement that supersedes any setbacks, so even the planning may not have setbacks. So the one thing that a revision to that condition can be basically an out if there's like if there's something that precludes their ability to do that.
Okay.
Makes sense.
And can I ask one quick question? With the window condition, can you read what that condition is? What the
Sure.
revised
The
condition?
applicant shall ensure that the window design incorporates a change in plane with 3.5-inch trim on the sides and top with a half sill on the bottom. So the change in plane is a non-metric condition.
That will work. That will work for us.
Okay. Real quickly, I'm going to look back at the gable. Shall advise the overhang to be at least 18 inches of the gable and 22-inch eave overhang. So is it the eave that you're worried about for Locust Street?
I just wanted to confirm that there wasn't any projection limitation that we would need to look at.
No, if you want to go 24, you're welcome to.
Okay.
I would say as practicable to city. I'm making this up, as practicable.
Yeah, that's practical.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much. Do we have a motion?
All right, so we have revised condition number 3. Revised condition number 2, corner trim. 3, revision to eaves as practical. Window, and new 13, which is the reduction in the size of the landmark. We did it.
I move to accept the recommendation of the staff and as proposed with the conditions, the added conditions of approval.
And that's for GLUA 2402 and HR 2401 and HR 2402.
I'd second that.
Board Member Green,
Aye.
Board Member Edgar,
Aye.
Board Member Lawrence,
Aye.
Vice Chair Powell,
Aye.
Chair Ferry.
Aye. All right, so thank you so much for your application. So let's move on to meeting minutes. Or does this closes the public testimony portion of our meeting? And we should move on to meeting minutes. I believe there were three separate meeting minutes to approve.
Can we do all at once?
Yes.
I would move to approve the, all 3 of those minutes.
I second that.
Board Member Green,
Aye.
Board Member Edgar,
Aye.
Board Member Lawrence,
Aye.
Vice Chair Powell,
Aye.
Chair Ferry.
Aye. And then we have a work session tonight based on solar panels in our discussion. So approving the historic review approval process, revisiting the policy number 12, which is our solar panels, literature review, and public outreach approach.
All right, this is the second work session the board has had. Just to provide a little background, when the board reviewed their work plan last summer, they identified re-reviewing the solar panel policy and, is it still meeting our needs for staff level review? I provided some background from the city of Denver, which we had a really great presentation this last summer from a staff planner from the city of Denver when we had our camp presentation with the Preservation Alliance. And what I heard back from the board was a little more context of, in pictures, what the city of Denver has done and what, our existing policy. And so I have those slides and I'll go through them. But in general, I think the larger question is we've created a policy of when solar panels go in front of planning staff as a type 1 decision. And then if you don't meet that, you're in front of the Historic Review Board. So right through that process, identified items as when they're on primary elevations, they need to go back to the Historic Review Board. And over the last couple of years, the board had a fair amount of applications. And I've always seen it as, is there a situation where the board wants to additionally refine what items can go at a staff level? Or when it's on a primary elevation, does it just always merit a public hearing because it's always context sensitive? And both of those answers are perfectly reasonable. So I'm going to open up, I have a little presentation, but really the direction tonight I'm looking for is this something the board wants to pursue, an amendment to the Historic Review Board policy for solar panels? Or based, and then we'll go through the process and meet with the neighborhood associations and come up with a revised decision of if there are additional items, the additional situations where a type 1 review for staff can be done. Or do you feel that, no, we don't really need to revise it? We think, when it's on a main elevation, it warrants, more context review. So both answers are fine. If there's consensus tonight, one way or the other, that's great. If there's not consensus, let me know as staff what additional information you would need, and we can just come back at a future meeting with that. There's no timetable for this work session. This is just on your work plan to kind of think through, and your answer, your deliberative answer, completes the work plan. So however you want to do it. So let's see. Okay. So just in general, how historic preservation is viewed, solar panels have changed over time. Solar panels were much larger. Nowadays, they're much slimmer and more easy to kind of fall into the background of the view. But there's also a clear understanding of climate change and the role of solar panels in our society and our neighborhoods, and historic districts don't need to be excluded from that conversation. So right now we have, as I kind of explained in this slide, if the board wants to move forward and continue to refine Policy 12, we would want to go through a public outreach process to property owners and the neighborhood associations. And when we have, previously have revised our HRB policy, we've gone through the public process and then had an initial draft that we presented to the city commission, and then really city commission as the elected officials, they provide kind of guidance and agreement, and then we kind of come back to the board to adopt. This is the same process the board went when the board adopted revisions to the design guidelines for middle housing. And it stayed within the board, proposed the draft to the city commission, got direction for the city commission, you came back and adopted the revisions. So the existing solar panel policy talks about design and color and what the structure, the flat roof structures, what the shingle style is. Really what this work session is zeroing in on is what I have underlined, which is for sloped roof locations. Solar panels are permitted on secondary facades of historic buildings and accessory structures for a type 1 staff review. And I'm going to take a sip of my tea. All right, so really, it's not all of the solar panel policy. It's really that what I have underlined is just the location on slope roofs. Can they be on primary elevations? So, yes, so HRB direction is needed. Do you want to consider revising this? Or do you want to just wait and kind of continue to feel out what's coming to the Historic Review Board and see if it makes sense to keep it as a type 3 because it's so context sensitive? All right, so I'm going to provide I took the City of Denver's revised guidelines, and they really, I think the City of Denver had a lot of folks who really wanted to support solar panels, and so they made a really concerted effort of how do we balance historic preservation, and clearly our communities want for so excuse me, solar panels. And so what I have here is if something's allowed, I'm sorry. Let me just take more water.
Yeah, take your time.
I may have hit my limit of time.
Well, we all read everything. Do you want us to
Yeah, I think
just
really
discuss?
what I'm looking for are the two areas in blue.
Or we can continue this to the next meeting. too.
No, I think, oh, sorry.
No, it's
I was doing so well, and then I think my throat was just dead. So the two items in blue, which is when you have a hip roof, the side portions of the hip roof that are visible today require going in front of the Historic Review Board. And then when you have a gable, the side elevations go in front of the Historic Review Board. The other areas either are consistent with Denver or the board would require it. So to me, these two, gabled and hip, is really a discussion. And is this something where the board would want to look at additional setback, like the back third, the back half, setback 5 feet, a metric of where on the side elevation? That's something that can be done as a demarcation of what would be type 1 or type 2. So really, I think, kind of learning more about what Denver has done on a staff level, I think this is really the crux of the question. Where you really had most of your hearings the last couple of years was really gabled houses on the gabled facing primary elevation, and those are often the south. So I'm going to keep going. I'm really sorry. Right now, secondary elevations are type 1. So is this something the board wants to look at? And if so, we can create a future work plan. And I'm going to turn.
Chair Ferry, is this a point where you feel like the board's ready to just kind of discuss what's in front of you, or?
I think we could have a basic discussion about whether or not we feel like we need to change the policy, or, and if so, we can move forward with looking at specific examples. So to me, when it's on the side of a gable, it does seem like a secondary location to me, or on, the side or back of a hipped roof. It seems secondary to me. The ones that are harder on the very front elevation, and they creep in there. So it says that these currently are not allowed, but to me, it would be a secondary structure in my opinion. Does anybody?
Unless it's on a corner. That'd be the caveat for me, because if it's on a corner, we've dealt with that, and that was why I believe we talked about that, was because it was very visible from that angle. So if it was in the middle of the block, it wouldn't have been an issue. But because it was a corner, that was the crux of the issue. So I think anything we change, we're rewriting right? So we haven't even discussed tiles yet. So we're gonna have to come up with something about tiles. Are we going to allow tiles on a historic home, or are we not? So I think we're going to have to reevaluate this. Now the question would be, do we want to go through your second list there of going out and getting neighborhood involvement and things like that before we make that decision?
Well, in general, when the Historic Review Board is made, the guideline is also really We always reach out, and I would really recommend meeting with both neighborhood associations. I'd probably request a board member to come with me, or be there kind of speaking, and really gaining what are people thinking about? Is this something that you think, you're saying, I think, the board thinks that this is something we should talk about, do you care? And then probably sending a letter to historic property owners. That's something we could do. It's not required, but it's always nice to check back with the community. That would be my minimum level, and then probably hold more work sessions over the spring and summer. And at some point, if, a red line copy is agreed upon by the board, then they would present it to the city commission.
Well, I think that would solve a couple problems. One, our board's goal was to get more involvement with, more education, right? And so I think that would play a part of that, educating the community by sending out a letter and saying, this is what your HRB is thinking about doing, what's your comment? And we'd get out there, and people know that we're concerned and looking for it. The neighborhood, of course, we definitely meet with Kenema and McLaughlin. And I think that would be a good thing. And then maybe a work session to tie it all together.
Is it, I guess what I to this moment have not heard kind of consensus from the board is this something you feel is warranted? I mean, we can always open things up, but, the goal, I think, is to have direction when we reach out to the community, because, well, there may be other pieces. You're really looking at, are there additional type 1 review options for solar panels? Is this still something that the board wants to pursue? If you don't want to make those changes, I wouldn't recommend starting a public engagement process. If you want to make those changes to allow additional ones, then I think it'd be worth the time and energy. But is there a consensus that the end point there would be additional type 1 reviews?
Well, I think that it would be valuable to just sort of let historic household owners know that that they don't have to go through a process, and that might make it easier for them to, go through the process of acquiring solar panels, because they don't have to come before the board. They don't have to pay the fee. They don't have to, go through the process. So I think it would be valuable, because I think it's something that we really need to move forward with, especially with our current climate condition. So from
yeah, I agree with the chair that it's something that we need to do everything that we can to move forward with, to make an easy path for people to utilize solar power without creating any stymieing. It's still being reviewed. I mean, it still have to go through an approval regardless. It's just whether or not the HRB would be involved in that approval. Nobody's going to be building some structure off their house to capture sun,
and then we can have a discussion as a board as to where those sort of limitations lie before reaching out to the community.
Yeah, I mean, one option, if I'm kind of hearing yes, continue, I would probably recommend, I know when you open it up too much, then the conversation gets unfocused. So really looking at, are there additional options for, primary elevations that you can see from the street? And it could be that, I might recommend, we have a couple options, is this half? Is it a third? Is it 2/3? Is it required 5-foot setback? Maybe even provide examples just to keep people focused. That could be something I could come up with, based on, keep talking, but based on your conversation, I could come up with kind of a little white paper for the next meeting that kind of lays out the issues and provides some of the options as a way to engage with the neighborhoods and historic owners with more of a concrete, concept.
I mean, another question I think that we should discuss as a board is what percentage of the roof can be covered. I know that some applications have come before us with, huge amounts of solar panels, and some have come with like one or two. So if there's a limitation on our, the amount of solar panels we would want placed on a historic home, but yes, I think.
So it basically boils down to, do we want to make it less restrictive for the public to the extent that there would be more types of applications that would be approved at staff level, and those would have to be defined satisfactorily. So I guess my question is, we look through those things, can we define any area that we think would be sufficiently utilized to make it worth the process? In other words, as I reviewed our policy number 12 and I compared it against Denver, you've got, some this way and some that way. You have that scenario, but as I look at it, I mean, for instance, things like gambrel roofs and mansard roofs, that's a very unusual application. So there would be no point in saying, okay, that becomes a type 1. I think we would agree on that. Bring it to the HRB and we would review it. So in the absence of my mind of saying, okay, we should make street-facing facades an approved, or in other words, quantifying some approved change that now that becomes a type 1, it doesn't have to come to the HRB. And I'm not sure I see anything. I mean, it seems like the guidelines are not that bad. So people that want to put them on a rear facing, a subordinate roof line can get us type 1 approval, no problem. It's only the ones that are kind of maybe, and we haven't been overwhelmed. So in other words, it would be a question, are we being overwhelmed and inundated with requests where this should be some portion of it moved into the staff discretion? And it seems like it doesn't loom as a large enough problem to me to open a procedure where staff has to put out public notices and respond and take all the processes that make that legitimate, if there are other issues that come before us that you might have more traction than that. Even like the solar shingles, that's going to be a small portion of them. And so I don't see a problem with letting those come before the board as opposed to saying, okay, we're going to approve solar shingles at staff level. That's kind of my thought on it. And then, of course, we will grapple with those on a one-by-one basis as they come in. If somebody comes in with a solar shingle one or whatever, but I don't see that as really an ascending technology because it just doesn't fit the mass-produced, cost-effective deal. It's so I think those will be relatively few.
One consideration to me, I never thought I would have a plug-in vehicle, but I do, okay? And I know that the electricity rates are making my wife cough, okay? She pays the bills. I like what we've got right now. If anything, I would love to see us reduce any costs associated with solar panels discussions. I don't want to make it prohibitive where people don't innovate and try to come up with a solution to use solar panels. And so this is where I'm kind of like, I've seen some bad applications of solar panels on historic properties, and I kind of cringe. And I don't want to see that because when it affects the historic view and structure and image of that property, that gives me problems. But I would love to see us try to encourage innovation by maybe doing something to making it less onerous on people trying to do this. And that's, I want to see us move on and get smarter. We and the public get smarter, but I think we need to jump on board.
Well, the fee is only $50, right?
Plus mailing labels, so about 70.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
from a regulatory standpoint, I don't think we're onerous.
Okay, but I'm just, my mindset is I want to keep it, I want to encourage people to envision what they can do. And
Well, and I think that was, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Nope.
I'm thinking that was one of the reasons we started this whole discussion, is because we had the one that couldn't go through staff came to us, and we're all shaking our heads, right? We're all trying to figure out, is this good, this is bad? We haven't fixed that.
Yeah.
So, we've learned what other people are doing. That's great, and I think there's been some excellent work done. But I think we need to change some things. I think we need to make it easier for folks that want to do it. But we are still a historic review board, and I have concerns about, gables and side streets and things like that, and so that hasn't been solved yet. So to not do anything, right, doesn't make sense to me. To review it again, maybe to what Christina was saying is, come back with a white paper that says, here are some examples about, because if I could look at it and say, okay, yeah, maybe a 5-foot setback or setback off the edge would be fine. It's hard to know because there's so many options right now.
Yeah, when I looked at the potential of building a garage for my wife's vehicle, and I thought that if I put solar panels on the one side all the way to the edges, where it just looked like all part of one roof, would I disguise it? And so, it's how do I disguise it yet get the advantage of it? And so it's I don't want it to detract. And
that's kind of a subjective discussion, because the Denver examples, and this is about the third thing down in our packet, and I looked at this before when we did the camp thing. I found this interesting in that what they showed as an approved installation is the middle one, and the solar panels, they're notched out for vents and everything like that. And a not approved was one because it didn't have enough front setback, and their requirement is at least 3 feet back. Honestly, that setback to me does not mean as much as a solar array that's all broken up and cut around vents and things like that. I would see a higher priority on a more monolithic look, and move a plumbing vent if you need to. A lot of times they have to strengthen the roof or whatever like that. That's a rather minor modification to get a nice even array. And in my mind, it would be more approvable to have an array like that, which is closer to the front, and in this case, probably in order to get a solar exposure with the neighboring house, as opposed to something that's all broken up like that. So that's a subjective decision that, that would have to come to the HRB, as I see it, probably.
Maybe. Maybe that might not. That might be our standard. That might be okay.
Well,
on our standard, right now, but if it's a front facade, if it's a front gable or something like that, then it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So then we're dealing with that, and quite frankly, as Paul said, prices are going up, electricity, and they're giving great benefits to people that put in solar. So we're going to see this. We're going to see more of it.
Yeah.
And it'd just be nice to have a more defined
Yeah,
plan.
yeah.
And this is pretty good, but I think we can take some things from Denver and,
Yeah.
and just get ours just a little bit better.
Well, I mean, there's like a,
I mean, these decisions
All
affect
up.
people on each side of the street too, right? Because you live on the south side of the street, your rear facing is your solar power. So then the
Exactly.
neighbors across the street,
yep,
they don't have that ability without having front-facing panels. And it's a major difference.
yep. Yep,
So what I can do is take this conversation and kind of put a little background white paper and then really some options and then continue the conversation. And I think it makes sense to reach out to the neighborhood association once the board has more consensus, just to constrain the conversation. So, I can just come back in March and get further direction. And at a point when the board feels that there is general consensus, or maybe here are some options, then we can reach out to the neighborhood association.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was just trying to get direction to figure out, because really, it will take staff time and energy, and so if there wasn't consensus to move forward, this was the meeting to get that direction.
Yeah, I think there is.
Okay.
yep, yes.
Yeah. All right, so should we move on to communications?
So I have one communication. Oregon City is a certified local government, which we're the first one, as always. So that is a program through the State Historic Preservation Office where we meet certain requirements and we are acknowledged by the Park Service and Historic Preservation Office. And so we get advantage of CLG grants. So the CLG grant deadline was last month, and I integrated the work plan that the Historic Review Board had. So hopefully by this, within the next couple months, we'll receive approval. And we have money to continue the compatible change project that we had to put on hold for staff. And that is really looking at the definition of new construction. Right now, we say it is a standalone building more than 200 square feet or an addition of more than 30% of a non-designated structure. This is definitely McLaughlin centered because it's a conservation district. And so the work that began a couple years ago thought, maybe there needs to be more refined definition. Is it height? Is it massing? Is there other things that might trigger if you built a 3-story tall tower, but you were less than 30% addition? Is that just as much warranting for the board to review? And so we have that. We have hopefully money to hire actually a consultant to help us, because I think it really is a bit of a coordination with the neighborhoods, the Historic Review Board, and really working on refining that, and some really background, as well as a condition of approval for windows. So we do have that work plan item, which hopefully brings a consultant in to help really look at what a standard condition of approval for new construction for windows would be. So those two items, as well as money for our welcome wagon packet that we send to all new historic property owners, we've identified to send it to every property owner this year. So that's 500 and something big packets. So money for postage and printing. So those are the 3 items which really come straight from the work plan.
Great.
So is there anything else? But I know Board Member Edgar has a comment. Was there anything else from staff?
No, I don't have anything.
Go for it.
I am a member of the Clackamas County Historic Review Board too. And the other day we had an issue that came before us, and it was about a National Register landmark property that had where the main building burned down in the property, and so a lot of alterations kind of happened, and no one monitored it over 25 years. And then all of a sudden, you come into a situation where they want to, there's a granary that was part of this historic property that outside of Canby that was part of just farming and all of the self-contained properties they had to make a farming little community work. And it was, how do you make all the changes? How do you do these things, but without modifying the reasons why this property was originally made a national landmark that got that designation? And it comes back to looking at it's not the individual part or piece, but it was the whole property. And there was a Restore Oregon piece that kind of reminded me of the principles of historic preservation. And in it gets in there where they show a historic building and then they show imaging something not compatible right next to it. And so as that we're looking at the big picture all the time. And I remember just thinking back 20 years ago in involvements in Kenema, where we were trying to look at every one of the houses in Kenema that were considered contributing historic houses, and then putting designs into the middle of all of that did not, that were radically different, that and how they detracted. And my desire is that that somehow we never lose track of the district and the properties that make the district why it exists, and that it's that part of it is important. And to me, I just want to. We've came up with that in the county stuff, and it just reminded me of being my own backyard, you know. And so anyway, just rambling of just things that go through my head. Thank you.
Are there any more communications? All right, I will now adjourn the February 27th meeting of the Historic Review Board.